Good evening, welcome. Spirituality is grossly misunderstood, pretty much across the board. Can I go home now? Did that do it for you? It's very common to relate spirituality and spiritual endeavors, spiritual engagement, spiritual practice, spiritual seeking, and all these things in terms of an individual doing something. It's like I'm trying to do something on the basis of some sort of a self-improvement or some sort of an acquisition of some lack or some kind of fulfilling something that is going to be more and better and perhaps, if I'm really ambitious, even ultimate in some sense. Although most spirituality doesn't bother to sell that. They're quite content with working your way up one or two rungs. And Buddhism is not very adamant about actually selling Buddhahood. They're quite happy to take your dollar and sell us a little compassion. But this approach, approaching spirituality from the point of view of a personal self-improvement or a personal engagement or a personal exploration to try to discover something that one has been lacking, or that, to somehow increase one's capacity to engage, to live, to do whatever, is a fundamental misunderstanding and is ultimately doomed to failure. I mean, this is not to say that self-improvement isn't fun. I mean, by all means, you can spend years and years doing self-improvement and have all kinds of fun doing that. I mean, you can learn to play piano, you can, work on your psychology, you can trim up your abs and develop a fabulous figure, I should probably point at someone else. All of that's doable, and by all means, have at it if that's of interest to you. But that essentially has nothing to do with what actual spirituality is, because all of this personal engagement, personal self-improvement is oriented around an individual, and in actual fact, there is no such thing. The spiritual problem, spiritual ignorance in technical terms, many spiritual traditions describe the problem of spirituality in terms of people are ignorant, and so they require true knowledge, or opening to true knowledge, or something that somehow remedies this ignorance and one discovers one's actual condition. Well, that's great. The problem of ignorance is the problem of misdefinition. The problem of essentially what's going on here is completely and utterly and essentially 180 degrees misinterpreted from what the actual event is. And the spiritual solution is simply coming to see that that's the case, which is kind of convenient because it already is the case. So you don't actually have to achieve anything or gain anything or accomplish anything. So problems, spiritual problems, in actual fact, all problems are defined into existence erroneously, defined into existence on the basis of inaccurate information. What people think they are, what they think they're doing, what they think their lives consist of, the way they think it works is all entirely inaccurate, entirely wrong in terms of general, popular, man on the street, consensus reality worldview and this sort of thing. What's actually happening here is utterly other than that. And so starting from that as your starting point, as your working premise, you're crippled from the start, because you're starting from wrong premises. You're starting from with assumptions that things are a certain way and that's where you're working from. That is entirely not the case. So you're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist using methods that are irrelevant, because they would apply only in the case if it was actually the way you thought it was, which it isn't. So typically, I suppose, we can imagine that your average person thinks of themselves as a human being existing in a material universe that exists outside themselves, and that has existed for X billion years, and embedded in an intense causal chain that stretches back to the Big Bang or whatever events in murky history that have worked down and worked down and worked down and worked down, and then here's little old me, swows out by my mother, my parents, in this vast otherness, this vast configuration of causality, and I'm just this little tiny semi-functional primate flailing around in this vast universe that's basically trying to crush me or eat me or whatever. And so here I am, and so I'm fighting to get a little pleasure, a little success, a little enjoyment, and trying to minimize the pain and suffering and failure, which is basically coming at me from every front. So that may be a over dramatization, but that's I'm putting that out as a caricature of a normal world view. The reality is, and so if you're operating from that premise, assuming that it's true, so if that was the case, then what would you do? Well, you would do what many people do, I suppose. And what they do makes perfect sense if you assume that that is the case and that their assumptions about what they are and what's going on is true. But it happens that what's really going on here is entirely and utterly other than that. So, working within that context, working from that premise, is going to be very inefficient. It's going to be very erratic in terms of achieving anything profound, because you're working from completely false starting point. It's as if you're trying to get to Moscow and you think you're in Paris, but you're actually on Mars. It's like, well, you go east. Well, yeah, okay. If you were in Paris, yeah, go east and you might get close to Moscow. But if you're on Mars, go east. It's not going to do a whole lot to get you close to Moscow. So our situation here, as it happens, is a whole lot better, a whole lot better than it is generally held to be. Thank God, praise Jesus. Hallelujah, in capital letters with exclamation point. So far from being a tiny little, semi-evolved, semi-functional primate scrambling around in this big, vast, inconceivably huge and complex universe that's other than you, and you're basically at its mercy. So far from being that, what you are, if you exist, I can't know that, but I'm assuming, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, assuming you exist. What you are is a transcendental, can't say what, transcendental actuality, a God, reality itself, that presents itself to itself as a field that we call the experiential field. And the experiential field is very much like a dream in the sense that it's an experiential apparition appearing to a perceiving principle that seems to present with all sorts of experiential characteristics, and such and such, you know. Well, that's filling in the blanks now. That's what you really are. So how different is that from being a little primate stuck in this inconceivably vast universe that's other than you, that's, you know, basically trying to just do nothing but take your money and kill you? I mean, not that that's not true, too. but only as an apparition, thank God. So, that this happens to be like that this happens to be the case, it's like winning the lottery. It's like, oh, how nice. I'm a transcendental infinity that everything is contained in, that is beyond space and time and is independent of all causality. Wow, that's kind of cool. And so all I really need to do, that being the case, is to notice that that's the case. Because it doesn't need to be improved. It doesn't need to be attained. It doesn't need to be achieved. I don't need to get from here to there. This is there. There is here. You know, and all of the theorizing about being this little pathetic primate in this ghastly situation I call my life, you know, stumbling through it, but you know, this failure, being spin doctored as being semi-success, pain being spin doctored as being semi-pleasure, is just all completely irrelevant. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It's just flavors of energy appearing very much like in a dream. I mean, in a dream, you have a nightmare. You know, you have some really shitty dream. You just would rather not have it, but you have it anyway, right? It comes and goes. These things happen. But it's just a dream, so who cares, right? No harm, no foul. You know, you wake up or you go on, you move on, and you have the next dream. Maybe it's a great dream or whatever. But it doesn't affect you because you're not actually in the dream, even if you seem to be in the dream at the time, experientially. Sorry if I seem to be a little jointed tonight. I had a bit too much sake with me, so I'm trying to string together a logical sequence of discourse that requires a certain amount of random access. Not too much. Is that even possible? Anyway.
That was Trump's demo.
So I hear.
Yeah.
He's a bad boy. So anyway. Good luck, good news. You are it. You are transcendental reality. You are, you know, beyond space and time, eternal, whatever, transcendental beingness. It transcends even being transcendental beingness. It transcends being itself. So, I mean, how weird is that? But you are that already. It's a given. You don't need to get there. You don't need to believe it. You don't need to achieve it. It just happens to be the case. All you have to do is notice it. And when you notice it clearly and self-verifyingly and obviously, oh, yeah, wow, that really is the case. It's really like that. What happens? The world, everything shifts about 180 degrees around. You know, at first it seems like, well, here I am, this little guy in this big world out there, and all of a sudden the world is this little thing in this big me. You know, I'm stuck in circumstances, and I'm, you know, life sucks, and then you die. Or no, I am eternal and beyond space and time and free of everything. And all these little weird circumstances and flavors seem to be wisping through my experience, you know, with wild abandon. And it's just a light show. It's just a dream. It's just weirdness. It's me sampling flavors of my own hypothetical nature. You know, who knows what, right? Which, needless to say, is a has rather different implications and a rather different flavor from the other worldview. And, in spiritual circles, this is called liberation. This is called enlightenment, coming to see that things are actually like that. And as I say, it happens to be that this is already the case. It happens to be that that is what this is. That's the structure of this. That's how this works. That's what this is made of. It's physics. It's not psychology or aspiration or philosophy. It's physics. It's what is actually here. What is it that is here? What is here is a field of consciousness. Your field of consciousness. And all this weird shit only appears because it appears in your field of consciousness. If it didn't appear in your field of consciousness, where is it? A dream that you never have dreamt and never will dream, where is it? A world that you never have seen and never will see, where is it? It's just a fantasy. It's a postulation. It's a hypothesis. It's like the Tibetans talk about the son of a barren woman, to try and illustrate that. The son of a barren woman doesn't exist, and that's the point. What does exist is experience. Experience is the only thing that can be found to exist. Much is made in modern materialistic times of physical science. You're having these physicists with their incredible, multi-trillion-dollar, cyclotrons and experiments where they're investigating the very primal forces that hold the atom together and all this wonderful stuff. But where do these cyclotrons exist? The cyclotrons exist within your experience, or they don't exist at all. With apologies for the scatteredness of my presentation, that's basically a sort of a jumping off point for what I have to present and what I invite further exploration of. And I will open the floor to any discussion if you're interested in chatting or anything at all.
Well, I followed the transcendental thing. It's a. I can see that it's the opposite of life as most people live it. And
Essentially.
there's. I feel like I'm sort of in a midway point because I'm not quite over there, and. So do you teach any practices,
yes,
say, to get from a midpoint to over there?
Yes, there is practice, and fortunately the practice is very easy. Because I'm a lazy man, so to me that's a major plus. It's easy and fun. I'm also a hedonist, so that's another major plus. So the practice is very simple. Be with any experience as you're experiencing it and see what it is, see what it's made of. And not by thinking about it, not by analyzing it, not by trying to deconstruct it, but just by experiencing it intimately. Feel the texture of it, feel the flavor of it. Now, like for example, I'm seeing this, this white napkin. What is it to see? What is white? Yeah. And not as, again, I'm using words, so I'm not as abstractions or as a chain of philosophy or logic, but this is present. What is it that's present? How is it present? And just explore that issue non-verbally. You don't need to suppress thought. I mean, your mind will be thinking thoughts and stuff. I mean, that happens. But just explore the texture of it. Because experiencing itself, just the physical event of experiencing, is the exercise of an inconceivable, profound nonlinear intelligence. So what's perceiving all the incredible details and nuances of color, for example, within your visual field right now, It happens absolutely effortlessly in real time, no time lag, and spontaneously. This inconceivable intelligence can assimilate all of these colors and shape and luminosities with absolute precision and absolute intimacy. And so what you're doing is, rather than riding over that and holding yourself as a you with a history and a being and all that, you're letting yourself sort of settle into your own machine language of experiencing, being with the presence of the actual experiencing, which is, again, it's not a passive mechanical thing. It's the exercise of a profound, essentially creative intelligence in real time. And so by settling into that experientially, you're letting, well, I should say, maybe more accurate to say, you're learning to 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 identify with that inconceivable spontaneous intelligence, the mode of that intelligence, as yours, because it is yours. You are what's seeing all the light in the visual field. You are what's experiencing all the inconceivable detail and nuance in your experience in real time. And that's an exercise of very, very powerful intelligence. So it's your intelligence. It's not a rational intelligence. It's not a thinking about things and, oh, I wonder what that is. What's that called? It's like bang. It's way, way, way more powerful than that. It's fast. It's instantaneous. It's inconceivably powerful. It's like the world's, the world's supercomputer to the power of the world's supercomputer is doing your experience already. And so by letting yourself settle into, and you already are that, so it's all very paradoxical. By letting yourself settle into that level of your own functioning, you sort of can wake up to the way that works and what that is, and that is you. And then you will see the extent to which there's inconceivable intelligent participation in experiencing in real time, which what you are is doing. But it's a completely irrational, completely transhuman level of function, and yet you already are it. So it's really it's a trick to let yourself relax into and to notice your own, the inconceivable subtlety and power of your own experiencing.
Yeah, isn't a lot of the stuff or I just know a lot of stuff that I experience is thought based.
Oh yeah, sure. Thought appears.
And the many layers of thought, of conditioning,
Yeah,
all that stuff,
sure.
and judgments.
Yeah, all that.
So, isn't all that stuff sort of the opposite of being transcendent?
No, it's actually not, because that is not actually you. That is object appearing to you. That's just more experiential qualities appearing. So yeah, the apparition, let's say the virtual presence of a persona, the virtual presence of a psyche and a psychology and all of this, typical neurotic scarring that we all consist of and all that, bang. That whole gestalt is just right here, right? But it's right here in exactly the same way all the colors in this room are right here. And so that is not you. That is something that what you are is perceiving. It's an object.
Right, but that stuff usually it can be like a jab, right?
Well, yeah, if you're identifying with it, the whole point of this is to trick yourself into easing out of that identification. I realize that identification is habitual, and typically most of us just sort of do that just as a knee-jerk, automatic, habitual thing. But the fact is that even when that identification is going on, in actual fact, in real time, you're also having direct experience, which is not a product of that identification and is not a product of that apparent psychological mechanism. And so the trick is you don't fight with that or deny it or try and squelch it. Let your human persona be itself and do itself, and you just sort of slip down and just check out a color, check out a sound, check out a texture, feel something, just feel what that experiencing is. And you'll notice in actual practice, you'll notice almost instantly you'll start thinking about it and going off into the usual stuff. And the trick is you just let go. Don't fight that. Don't try to stay with this. Don't try to stay with that. Just let go, and you'll drift off into a whirlwind of thinking about it, and and worrying if you're doing it right, and wondering what you're doing tonight, and all the usual stuff, right? And then when from time to time, when you get a little more just a moment of openness or relaxation, just do it again. Just tune into the presence of color. How is color present? Not as a question, but just feel that presence and let the feeling show you what it is. And again, you'll spin off. Okay. So that's sort of the cycle.
You don't bother with meditation.
This is a meditation, but it's not a meditation as it's normally understood.
Right, but you don't teach them, say, form of sitting meditation.
Oh, no.
I mean, that's a waste of time.
Basically, I mean, because again, it's something that an individual is doing, and what you are is not addressed one way or the other by whether you're sitting in meditation or you're on the john or you're in a fight with your spouse or whatever. It's all the same experiencing, and that what we're interested in is what experience is, not playing off one quality of experience versus another. We're not trying to play off quiet mind versus busy mind, identification versus unidentification. All of that's irrelevant. Those are just various modes of energy apparition. What we're doing is just settling into what is this energy apparition. That's why I call this yoga of radiant presence, because experience is present, and it presents us all of these astounding experiential characteristics, like color, light, sound, sensation, thought. I mean, just any, you could, we have endless classifications for all this stuff, and most of it is beyond human classification anyway. Weird psychic vibes and flavors and whatever. But the classifying is not the point. The point is what is it, and not what is this portion of it and what's that portion of it and what this portion of it. What is the whole? What is all of this stuff? Any of it? What is it in essence? And it turns out to all be the same. Experience is one thing that happens in one way, whether it's sensory experience or psychological experience or mental experience or psychic experience or any kind of experience. And so and it's already happening. It's right here. It's not hidden. It's not concealed. It's nakedly explicit. And so the trick is to, instead of the usual being distracted with all of our human gamesmanship, is just, from time to time, and not fighting that human gamesmanship. We're not trying to squelch that, because that's going to, because that's just another way to get sucked into, when you try to correct something, you're actually feeding it. It's throwing gasoline on that fire. So trying to get out of the human personality is making it stronger, because you're still relating to it. The human personality is irrelevant. What's interesting is the fact of the presence of experience, just as a fact, the objectivity of that this is actually here. What is this that is actually here? What is the here-ness that this is? Not as an abstraction, but as the actuality that this is. And so and it turns out that this is actually doable. I mean, it's for me, I'm saying it's just an assertion, but I think if you play with this, you'll discover you can actually make headway pretty easily. You just feel the presence of experience, and doing that shows you how to do it. Because again, it's all very paradoxical, because of course you already always feel in the presence of your experience. So it's not like you're actually doing anything you don't always do. You're just kind of tuning into it with your conscious attention. And because experiencing, because the presence of experience is not just a mechanical inert event, it's an inconceivable exercise of active intelligent engagement. By tuning into that, you are letting yourself tune into that level of the active intelligent engagement, which actually you are doing spontaneously. And so by tuning into that, you learn its language. It validates itself. You discover it's there by noticing it. Yeah. Good. Yeah. I'm not saying don't meditate. I'm saying it doesn't matter whether you meditate or brush your teeth. And I would say, you know, it may sound like a fine point, but it's not so much bringing presence as noticing that the presence that is intrinsically spontaneously there. Presence is already a done deal, and so by noticing that presence, you are dropping into the presence that you are already completely bringing to the fact of experiencing, because experiencing is nothing more than the bringing of presence to itself, so to speak. How do you talk about it? Sure. Well, I think we all have insight into that. We're not actually in a body. The body is appearing in you. The body's appearing in the spiritual field, and the body appears and disappears every time you get distracted or go to sleep or have a dream. You start dreaming, and there's another body appears, which might be like your body or might actually be different, might even be radically different. And it seems to be, you seem to be in that body for that duration, and that disappears. You know, and then you're in deep sleep, and there's maybe no particular body or whatever degree of energy, you know, qualities are present amorphously or whatever. But so seeming embodiment, seeming sort of, let's say, frameworks of embodiment, frameworks of functionality, of vehicular engagement in an environment or something, come and go within the experiential field with wild abandon. You know, every time you think of something and you get lost in a train of thought or in a daydream, you're basically in a whole different embodiment. You're in a thought body, you're in a, I mean, you know, whatever. So I think we all have, you know, experience of this kind of, this nature of the relationship of consciousness to form. And I think that will continue in various steps. And I suspect that there's no limit whatsoever, other than the inherent nature of what this is, which of course is unresolvable, so who knows. in terms of what that can look like. And again, we know that from our normal experience. It can look like waking experience. It can look like deep sleep. It can look like a dream. It can look like deep anesthesia. It can look like being lost in thought. It can look like being in sexual passion. It can look like there's a range of ways it can look. It's just uncategorizable. But it's always experiential qualities in presence. To me, the fundamental point is the discovery that the primal ontological entity is, you could put it simplistically. You could say what is here is consciousness, and forms, patterns of energy appear within consciousness. And the patterns appear because of the consciousness, not the other way around. Typically in materialistic hypothesis, we have exactly the opposite here. The consciousness is somehow a byproduct of matter, which is the root of all patterning. And that's a reasonable hypothesis, but it's putting the cart before the horse. Because the only reason we know there's matter is because it seems to be appearing occasionally in consciousness. So consciousness is the given. Experience is the given. Whether or not there's a world, the only evidence that there's a world is because it appears in consciousness, not the other way around. The world is not the given. Consciousness is the given. An objective world, a material world, matter at all, is a hypothesis at best. And to turn that around and say, no, that's the starting point, is just an assertion. There's no basis for it to stand on. Whereas Occam's razor, the simplest approach is, what is the root primal phenomenon? What's the original phenomenon? Presence of experiential field. Patterns appear within that experiential field, and then hypotheses are generated as to what those patterns are. Oh, this might be a world. These might be other humans. This might be an environment. There might be space and time. There might be past and the future. There might be causality. There might be blah, 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 blah. And you have the whole history of science, recapitulating itself. But it's all hypothesis. The only fact is the presence of the experiential field. And that's the fact that's right here, right now. And so that being the fact, that's what I'm interested in. What is this fact? What is this presence, this experiential field that exists?
I don't have to get that there's any energy occurring through anything.
No.
So much as... It's
just a way of putting it.
Yeah, but could another way of putting it be sort of like forms of consciousness? What experience in consciousness?
Whatever. It doesn't matter how you put it because it's all inaccurate.
Yeah.
One thing that I've discovered, and that I will posit, and I invite you to explore, is that ultimately the actual nature of anything is entirely unresolvable. So exactly what anything is, precisely, is a question mark. You can look really, really closely at anything, and it's always going to be a little fuzzy. So you're going to be, it's a lot like this, but maybe it's like that. And you look closer still, and it's still fuzzy. You look closer still, and it's still fuzzy. Of course, physicists have discovered that very same thing. The closer you look at matter, it doesn't get any sharper, it's still fuzzy. Look at mind, look at consciousness, look at anything. So you can't actually resolve conclusively that anything is a certain thing or a certain way. So at best, all of these, positings and these hypotheses that it's like this or it's like that are, vague approximations that are either useful jumping off points or traps in quicksand that you get stuck in if you buy into it.
Well, I guess part of the sense I have is that thinking of it as something appearing as something is kind of a trap.
Oh, it's totally a trap. It's very heavy-handed. But if you're at the point where that's relevant, then you're advanced yogi, so that's great. But yeah, ultimately that's just another scene. Even if there's anything at all,
Yeah.
it's ultimately a silliness. But that's being a slightly more advanced yogi. And if you're at that point, cool. That's fun.
It's this whole looking at things. That's unfun.
Of course, exactly, and that's the point, is to discover that is the case. You know, you sit and look at a chair, and all of a sudden there's no chair, and there's no you, and there's not even any looking, and the whole thing is just what? And yet it doesn't stop in any simple sense. But the trick is to discover that for yourself firsthand, experientially. You know, theory isn't worth a damn. You can become, you can be a pundit and be able to spout philosophies and all that, and that's not going to do any good. I mean, you can write a book and have a career, but what good is that going to do when you get there? The Tibetans say that spirituality is training for dying, and I kind of like that, just because that's kind of put up or shut up time. Because all of your worldly success and failure and strivings and all of that, it's like, okay, that moment, 2 minutes before you die, what's all that worth? And then 1 minute after you die, what's all that worth? I mean, you go to sleep and this whole world disappears. Where's your success and failure and pleasure and pain then? Just spit out a new version in a dream.
Right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you say that the only thing that doesn't change is the context?
Yes, sure. But ultimately, there's nothing but that context. So that statement is basically meaningless after a certain point. Yeah, that's what you are, and that's what this is too. Yeah, everything that seems to be more than that turns out to be actually that when you look at it more closely. It's all context. All the elements and subsystems that we suppose are actually present and involved in any causal chain or event of things happening, all just melts away. But anyway, don't worry about that. Find out this thing. And someone else say it doesn't do anything.
So really just down to experiencing how interesting.
Yeah, and not without interpreting per se, but noticing that experiencing itself is intrinsically without interpreting. Interpretation is like a higher harmonic that happens within experience. It's a kind of a meta pattern that appears within the apparitional patterns, but experience itself is completely beyond, you know, prior to interpretation.
So once you start experiencing, you start interpreting, then you're separating yourself from the direct experience.
Yeah, only if you believe it. The problem is not interpreting, the problem is believing in it. When you get to in interpretations of this hypothesis, you can do it with wild abandon and you won't be entrapped. But as soon as you believe an interpretation, then you're a samsarin, as we say in the trade. Samsarin? Samsarin? I'm an American. We have samsarin. See, we ain't got no samsarin. Samsarin.
There is only samsara.
There's only samsara. There's no samsara. I see what they say. There's only tomatoes.
Well, that's it.
The vibration of that becomes clear.
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes contact. That,
It doesn't become. It turns out to you discover that it has always been.
um,
Everything was ultimately everything was also transcendent. And the jumping off point, the interface point of transcendence is this present experience, which happens to be what absolute infinite transcendence looks like. And the trick is to look closely at this and let yourself discover that it is that, because it will show you that it is that, because it can't be found actually as being anything other than that if you look closely. Yes, ultimate transcendence, transcendentality, is not a theory or a hypothesis or an idea. It's actually the only fact. It's the existing condition. It's what exists in the way in which it exists. Yeah, and the trick is to discover that for yourself, experience it. And the way to do it is look at experience and what is it? Mhm. Pain is a very interesting experience. Pain is a lot like pleasure, a lot like anything. It's an experience. Well, you don't need to transcend it because it comes and goes. The problem is not pain. The problem is identifying that it's my pain and it shouldn't be there. It's not this. It's not the pain that's the problem. It's the backstory around it. You build up a whole narrative of, oh, well, this is terrible. We shouldn't be having that. Which is doesn't happen. I can imagine a time it's not going to be happening, and I want to be there. I don't want to be here, and so all of a sudden you're wrapped up in this whole soap opera, and pushing away at the pain as far hard as you can, which doesn't do a whole lot of good. Just pushing at experience doesn't make it go away. Pain is energy presence, and like all energy presence, it comes and goes, and like all energy presence, it doesn't leave any mark in the consciousness. I mean, you've experienced the worst pain you've ever experienced, and where is it now? You've experienced the greatest pleasure you've ever experienced, and where is it now? These things come and go, but the experience is absolutely clear. The experience is like an absolutely flawlessly clear window that all these folders appear. Pain appears, pleasure appears, color appears. All these seeming events and all these energy patterns dance around and appear, and they come and go. But the glass is never hurt by what appears in it. Like a TV screen, you can see a forest fire, a newsreel about a forest fire on a TV, but the TV screen doesn't catch fire. It's not affected by it. And likewise, this presence of experiential field, which is what you actually are, is not affected by or damaged by what seems to appear in it. Like a dream. You can dream about the most horrible pain in the world. You can dream about forest fires and floods and the earth exploding and everything else and getting stabbed by knives. The dreamer never gets hurt. The dreamer just wakes up and, oh, wow, just a dream. And now we look back on our past history and it may as well have been a dream. Where is it now? Pain hurts. Life's pain. Pain is painful. Pleasure is pleasurable. Color is colorful. And disco sucks.
The window is.
There's no what?
The window is the
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where's this window?
There's no window. It's metaphor. you heard of these parables. I hear tell all these great spiritual personages use these parables, so I'm trying to. But it's a bitch actually. You forgive me. You find yourself in this situation trying to talk about stuff that you can't be talked about, and so what are you going to talk about? You end up talking about things that can be talked about that aren't what you're trying to talk about, which can't be talked about. And so if you're clever and artful enough, somehow you can make what you're talking about obliquely relevant anyway.
Speaking of spiritual people and parables, can you find many examples in mainstream spiritual paths of the transcendent reality?
Oh, countless.
Because it gets bastardized and twisted and missed, I think.
Yeah, countless. But again, the problem is context. Usually these are little gems that are, if you see that in the context of what they actually are, you get it. But usually they're embedded in a bigger context that is more confusing and obscure, and with implications that are,
But why does it seem like everybody that adheres to those philosophies misses the transcendental reality story behind it at the base of it?
Well, because you only get the transcendental if you actually get the transcendental. If you
but that's the point of those. That's the point of those.
Yeah,
parables.
It is a point. It is a point. That's what
this would be heresy brought into any of those.
Yeah, this would be heresy in Christianity or heresy in Buddhism, and yet paradoxically, what I'm doing is exactly what Jesus was trying to do and Buddha was trying to do. But the problem is, you tell transcendental actuality, try to convey it to people that don't understand it. They're going to understand what they do of it, which won't be it, and yet they might have a sense of, wow, this is incredible, something here is amazing. And so, they start a religion or whatever and decide to go out and kill a few million people or whatever, which is what religions generally end up doing. Which is all beside the point. It's like, yeah, you missed, like, there was kind of a point here that you guys kind of missed. But it's the nature of ignorance, the nature of human misunderstanding.
There's a huge irony or paradox or whatever in that you have a huge multitude of people following something that was basically an explanation of transcendent reality that isn't interpreted as transcendent reality.
Yeah. It's bizarre. It's bizarre.
In many religions, there are people who see this.
Oh, certainly. There's many realized people of that. And if they're clever, they'll be quiet and enjoy it. And if they speak up, then they're going to have like throwing a rock in a pond, and the ripples will go out every which way, and God knows what's going to happen. Who knows what all this is going to lead to? In 2,000 years, we'll have Brownianity. That's not what he said. Burn him at the stake. You heard it?
You're not worth your salt to have burned at the stake. Yeah, I can bring that up because I went to a service this past Sunday without Stephen, who basically got stoned. And I'm trying to find the transcendent reality in the discussion of the acts, I guess it was. And I'm seeing, what I think are glimpses of that trying to be taught, but of course the sermon is completely not.
Yeah. This is the problem. Is the percentage. I can think of some of the. If you go looking, some of the the higher Buddhist tantras and sutras and stuff, and the Gospel of Thomas, maybe 20% of the Gospel of Thomas and things like that are very pith and very direct and very actually clear and accurate. But then there's all the other stuff which isn't, and the problem is, apparently, your average person doesn't have the capacity to distinguish the one from the other. Which is I guess where the trouble comes in. I should say, I imagine that many spiritually savvy modern people have heard the Heart Sutra, from Buddhism. Form is the void, and void is the form. Form is not other than the void, and void is not other than the form. And that's the whole shooting match right there. Bang. You know, and people have heard it, but why aren't they realized? Why aren't they liberated? Form is the void. Okay, so what does that mean? What does that mean? Form is anything that looks like anything, and void means, what does void mean? It means I don't know. So it means question mark. And so right away, bang. So this question mark. Oh, wow. All of a sudden, there's no napkin. Just a question mark. Without there needing to not be a napkin. Because they're one and the same. Form is the void, void is the form, form is not other than the void, void is not other than the form. You couldn't be spelled out much more clearly. And that's not hidden, that's not even secret. I mean, Buddhists are chanting that daily in their temples or whatever.
Well, Buddhists seem to get it a little more than Christians.
Who knows? I mean, they seem to be not so out there killing people.
Yeah, I can't remember the form and the void part that's in the Bible. I'm not sure where that's.
Well, there's little snippets. The regular Bible. I mean, it's been a while since I studied my Bible. I mean, in the beginning was the Word. In the Word was, I don't know. Yeah, I mean that says it all. The Word is the radiance, what I call radiance. The Word is the experiential characteristic. In the beginning, there is radiance. There is the presence of experiential characteristics, which is with God, i.e., the fact that these things are somehow show up as being experienced. I mean, that's bang. That's the whole shooting match, and that's the pinnacle. That's like the high point of that level of biblical.
On the first page.
I mean, there's lots of the Gospel of Thomas is. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's an apocryphal gospel that didn't make it in the Bible. Yeah, one of the many they left out. But it's basically a yoga manual. About half of it is quite obscure, just in terms of the kind of the idiom that he put things. But the other half, and especially about 20% of it, is very, very precise and clear yoga instruction. If your eye be single, your whole body will be filled with light. That's not. That doesn't mean cut out one of your eyes. That means you notice that your eyes are not seeing your experience. What is seeing your experience? It is single. Your experience is seen from the principle that sees it, and your whole body is full of light because your whole body is full of light. You go to sleep and you're still full. Your experience is full of light. Experience is never fuller or less full. You go to sleep, you're not experiencing any less than when you're awake. You close your eyes, the field of vision is not any less full. It's full of different characteristics, different textures, but it's not like all of a sudden, my field of vision is shrunk or is little, there's nothing there. You go into deep sleep and your field of vision is not full. There's always the entire field of experience is always full of characteristics. These characteristics can show up with all different sorts of textures and densities and so on and so forth. But just look at it. You're awake and your field of vision is full. Your field of hearing is full. You're in an absolutely silent room. Your field of hearing is still full. You turn off the lights. Your field of vision is still full. It's full of a lot of blackness and little whatever hallucinations or whatever. But field of thoughts always full. Field of sensations always full. You drift off and go to sleep. And that's still the case. It all sort of shifts gears into a whole different sort of a textural range, but it's not any less full. And then you start dreaming, and all of a sudden it's another shift of gears to different range, but it's not any more or less full. Nothing is gained, nothing is added into or lost from the fullness of experience. It just is continually transforming, morphing what it looks like in terms of within any particular range of bandwidth or textures, or across to another band, which is another texture. like when you close your eyes, all of a sudden it's a whole different kind of a range of textures. But it's not a loss, it's just it's a gear shift between views. So if your eye is single, your whole body will full of light. When you see what you are seeing your experience, which is not physical, subjectively speaking, it's not physical. The physicality shows up into that. You know you have a body because it's experienced from the point of view of your experiencing faculty. So on and so forth. I mean,
But I think no aspect depends on any other aspect.
No, absolutely not.
Or it depends on anything to be true.
Nothing depends on anything.
This is kind of interesting because I think a big part of what feels like a problem is that we're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to have things mean something in some sort of context.
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, when you get the absolute objective fact of unresolvability, then that's completely invalidated. It's irrelevant. Of course, nothing can make sense because you can't tell what anything is. You have to have some benchmark where I know what this is, and so I can use that as a reference point to figure out what this is relative to that. But you can't ever find a this. You're looking at any of this, and it's like, well, what is it?
Well, that benchmark is always presumed in some way to exist. That there's some place from which things can be seen as true, as such.
Well, there is, but the problem is you have to understand what those terms mean. There is one true perspective, and that perspective, the closest word we have to indicating that perspective is what we might call experiencing. That is, even experiencing cannot be found; it's unresolvable. So here's experiencing. What is it? But yeah, good luck with that one. But that's as good as you get.
But this incessant need to imagine there's some way, some perspective, that's always imagined.
Yeah.
And that's always the trap.
That's the trap. The downfall, the spiritual downfall is trying to make sense of anything, and especially imagining that it's possible, and especially that you've succeeded. Oh, now I know what something is. As soon as you know what one thing is, you know what everything is by reference, and then you're living in a fantasy. You're a crazy person, which is, of course, the normal human condition. So well very familiar. Excuse me, sir. Okay, go ahead. Who likes to play this? A lot of us can play.
It's like basing your whole financial life on finding the pot at the end of the rainbow.
Finding the pot at the end of the rainbow. It can be very lucrative.
What do you make of my this manifestation of so much hunger, so much violence, so much ignorance?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, as I see it, it's turbulence, and turbulence is the basic process of mixing. And I think that seems to be an intrinsic aspect of the way of the inherent metabolism of this actuality that's doing itself, that's being itself here. For some reason, it seems to function with turbulence. It seems to generate a whole lot of turbulence. is why nothing is ever resolved and everything is always incomplete and nothing is ever finished and everything's always, it's always cascading from, some degree of slight disharmony to another degree of slight disharmony, or maybe not so slight. Thank you so much. Yeah, and we think because of the fantasy of wanting stasis, wanting equilibrium, we imagine turbulence as being a problem. But in actual fact, turbulence is how everything is generated when mixing things.
So if there wasn't turbulence, you wouldn't have a plot, you wouldn't have a story.
Yeah, and turbulence is how all forms are generated and interact. Basically, it shows up on all different scales of apparent functioning.
Turbulence makes it interesting.
Well, it makes it is the nature of progression of seeming events. Life forms want to eat other life forms. Life forms want to, like human life forms want to have, dominance as part of their genetic breeding drive or whatever, or the workness of their personality, which is a spin-off of that. And also all of these complex systems generate other complexities, which bounce against other systems with parent complexities in a turbulent, chaotic fashion, which never really resolves elegantly into other turbulent and chaotic systems, interactions that never resolve elegantly. There's this endless, slow motion train there. that is, that's a chain of events. And, we characterize that, it's easy to, why is there hunger? Why is there suffering? Why is there... Well, there's also a lot of not hunger. There's also a lot of not suffering. There's also a lot of not pain. And, so again, the wheel keeps turning. The turbulence keeps turning. Nothing ever is resolved. Those in pain, it will come a time when they're not in pain. And those that are not in pain, there will come a time when they are in pain.
Those times of letting pain and fullness don't come without pain and hunger.
Yeah, because all you get is the system. You can't pull a piece out of the system and cast it in plastic and freeze it and sit it on your shelf and have it sit there. There is absolutely no permanence. There's no stasis. All forms, all patterns are instantaneously morphing into ugliness. So, how you can't change anything, you can't preserve anything, you can't keep anything. Everything's becoming something else in real time. I mean, with like zero time lag. It's already, even when it's appearing, it's all. But in practice, the trick is always to be with this on as immediate and intimate a level as possible, and then all of these superfluities of problems of life and health and pain and this and that and the other all appear within this present experiencing. So what is that? Be with that fact. And all that other comes with, and in fact, all that other comes into clarity, if at all, mainly from seeing what experience is, because that's what it all actually turns out to be anyway. It's like, if you want to make sense of a dream, trying to sort out the events of the dream is pointless. Make sense of the fact of dreaming, and then making sense of the dream comes with, to the extent that's possible.
Don't you think that's why some people can experience great challenges and not be stressed by them?
Oh, absolutely.
We have much more ability to be with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have more of a sense of not micromanaging this detail and that detail and needing to cling to it or something. It's a matter of sort of trusting the flow. Just sort of, And ultimately, that turns out to be the most efficient way to function anyway. I mean, when you're driving, for example, the best drivers are those that just sort of do it flow. If you're thinking about, oh my God, there's that pedestrian, this car, and that car, you're going to have a wreck. You're paying too much attention to the trees and not enough to the forest. When you sort of relax and sit back and just sort of feel the flow, it just all happens real smoothly. And that's sort of a general approach to functioning in motion generally, I think. And I think it comes from sort of sitting back more fully into what you actually are, and being less, hanging yourself out and identifying yourself as this, that, and the other, all these little details.
It's just the way it's being. Again, it's like I remember in my lifetime a time when our whole society was much less stressed, in my perspective. and it just seems it just goes over here, and it doesn't matter where you go, north, south, east, or west. It's amped up. There's little pockets of it.
The flavor of the times is interesting.
Yeah.
But you remember the Cold War? There was stress back then too.
Oh yeah.
Different flavors. The modern flavor is interesting. Everyone basically completely knows explicitly that the absolute hopelessness of life, but no one wants to actually admit it. Because then they'd have to get off their ass and do something about it. Have to actually take to the streets. And most people don't actually go that far. But I should. If I was going to stand up for what I believe in, I'd be out in the streets carrying a gun. But if I really want to do that, I'm not just sitting here drinking tea. Maybe, who knows? Who knows? That's the thing. The flavors of time, the flavors of the zeitgeist of the way events change in different eras and all that is fascinating. And that's, to me, that's the absolute lusciousness of this astoundingness here is the incredible richness and profundity and meaningfulness of all the flavors that present themselves. Every level, both levels of detail and sort of levels of the sort of gestalt or the flavor of the field at the moment or something, and the way it's endlessly morphing and dancing with itself, and it's just fascinating. The experience is so much fun.
The meaning of it is in the message of it. Because otherwise, no meaning continues or exists. So that all the premises change, the very fundamentals of any position just almost shifting time.
And to get to the meaning of it, you have to get to what it is. And I said, have at it, by all means.
So what do you say to the pure mechanical, materialistic scientist who says there's no consciousness out of mind?
No consciousness without a mind?
Yeah.
I have no problem with that. But it's just, you can't find a mind separate from consciousness, and you can't find a consciousness separate from mind. Or brain, Find the brain without consciousness. Show someone without consciousness, please show me your brain. The only place you can find brains is in consciousness. So there's, and every time you find consciousness, you seem to find a brain, as far as we know, from our perspective. So how can you, calling it, this is a brain and that's consciousness, but when this consciousness is always a brain, when there's a brain, there's always consciousness. So maybe if they're two names for aspects of the same thing. I mean, I have no problem with materialism at all. The problem is just supposing that there's anything that's primary. Yeah, matter is absolute, but look at what matter is. And when you look at matter, you find experience.
So if the entire world was blown up, is there still consciousness?
You better hope there's intelligent life on space because there's bugger all here on Earth.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, of course, because if there's matter, there's consciousness. If there's space-time, there's consciousness. Consciousness is the root phenomena of being. Consciousness is the root field. Consciousness is the unified field. And then the four forces appear as aspects of that, which appears as the whole material, the dance of material energies. And then life forms, of course, are elaborations, harmonics of all that. And so it all comes back, all these incredible elaborated patterns come back to elaborations of the prime field, which is consciousness. We call it consciousness. Saying it's consciousness is silly because it's meaningless. It's just giving it giving it an arbitrary name. Because saying it's consciousness doesn't mean anything. You can't say it's consciousness, and that is it's absolute. It's undefinable. It's not. It doesn't exist relative to anything else. So it is it. I may as well call it Harry or dog shit. It's called consciousness. The prime fact, the prime field, the Big Bang. I mean, it's all the same thing. This root fact that everything is a harmonic of, an elaboration of, without ever departing from that fact.
So how could it be experienced by experiences?
Because experience, what? Experience without experience, what would that even mean? There is, if the root phenomena is consciousness, then there's always experiences. The experiencer, let's say the archetypal experiencing principle is a mouthful. The archetypal experiencing principle is the root phenomena, is the unified field. And it shows up physically as the field that is the Big Bang, that the forces come from, with all of its physical elaborations, and it shows up biologically as all these life forms, and it shows up psychologically as what we experience as mind and personality and all of that. But it's all just fractal elaborations of one principle without ever departing from it.
What about memory?
Memory is fascinating, isn't it? It's an obvious principle that we're all very familiar with, and it's very mysterious. But an interesting thing to notice about memory is it always happens in the present moment. Only the present moment can be found. And this is self-evident, but if you look very closely at it, it becomes a very interesting phenomenon. There's absolutely no past and future or theory, and largely based on the phenomena of memory, which is an exercise of intelligence that happens in real time. So in other words, your entire life you remember now. You ever had a dream? I've experienced this, and very clearly, and it's quite interesting. You ever had a dream where you find yourself in a dream and you're someplace where you have been for years, and you have memories of having been there for years? Like the backstory of the dream. Have you ever experienced that? I've experienced. I think it probably happens more fairly often, but a couple of times I've experienced that very, very clearly. You're like, "Wow, wait a minute, that was really cool." And if you look right now, the only evidence you have of the past is your memory, which is happening right now. And so one interpretation of that is, well, that is because it really happened, and my memory somehow recalls that. But that's just a hypothesis. You just can't know. You can't resolve what's really going on there. But you can't resolve what's really going on anyway, so there's no surprise. And the point isn't to try and pin it down and being this and that. The point is to notice how weird it is. And we take these things for granted as just being, everyday garden variety, like normalcy. But normalcy is just a word for this inconceivable weirdness that is always exactly the way it is. And noticing how weird it is fun, interesting, and potentially profitable. I mean, that's the nature of this yoga that I present. Basically just tripping on experience. noticing how amazing experience is. But it turns out that tripping on experience is very, very powerful, because our sense of normalcy and our dullness, our unquestioning acceptance of our ideas about what's going on here, is the very nature of the prison we're stuck in, if any. It's a sense of, well, things are a certain way, I am a certain way, and you don't even question that you're stuck with that, because you just think it is the case, which is for sure a sign of stuckness. You don't even consider the possibility of an alternative. And so actually noticing, discovering weirdness, discovering, wow, yeah, I don't really know what's going on. It can be enormously powerful in terms of opening yourself to alternatives, to other ways of being with your life, being with your actuality and what you do and the way you do it. And you don't lose anything, and you potentially can discover alternative and new and improved ways of seeing things. And it's a lot of fun, and operators are standing by. Except for the operators thing. I'm just standing by. The R is true though. More than it is, I don't like doing that.
That's what you feel comes the closest to really expressing this beside yourself.
Longshan Rabjan. But unfortunately he's long dead.
Yeah, he's well.
I don't know. There's lots of great, wise people saying a lot of interesting things. The problem is, the problem with spiritual teachings and that sort of thing is not the teacher, but to see what the teacher's talking about.
Yeah.
And it's real easy to talk about the different teachers and what they're presenting, but it's not about the teacher and the way he presents it. It's about what he's trying to present, which is always the same thing. Reality is one way. Reality is not like this. Buddhist reality and Christian reality are not two different realities. And the reality of Islam is not a different reality. They're talking about the same damn thing. But it seems different because of the way they're putting it. And the trick is to not get stuck on the words and the specifics, but use that as a jumping off point into the actuality. And then from the point of view of the actuality, you can look at various teachers and notice ways in which some are a little more clear, naked, and efficient, and so on. But anytime you're using words or symbols, you're basically trying to communicate the uncommunicable. You're trying to specify the unspecifiable. So there's bound to be a certain translation gap here. So it's really down to the artfulness of innuendo. Terrible. Hypnosis.
Would you say you tried it afterwards, effectively communicating?
Absolutely. I think the Sargadata is really good. I think Manam Harshi is really good. I think that, I don't know, a lot of these people are really good. But again, you got to see what they're talking about and not just get on their bandwagon. It's not about Nisargadatta, it's about what Nisargadatta was trying to say. And likewise, so on and so forth. I mean, it's very strange. Everyone, every word that any human has ever uttered is supposedly about reality. Because what else is there to talk about? So you have clansmen and psychotics and scientists and lying politicians and spiritual teachers, and they're all talking about the same thing. And yet how different is what they say? That just points out how weird what they're trying to talk about is. It's like the ultimate chameleon. That which is entirely unresolvable as being this or that. How can you talk about what it is? It's anything, and more than that. This principle of unresolvability is probably the most primal principle, besides its actuality, it's probably the most primal principle of it. And Buddhism talks about, Christianity talks about it when we talk about the transcendence and the effulgence and the God is beyond everything, and they're trying to indicate the unresolvable nature of this actuality. They tend to convey it largely as a dualism, where there's God over there that's all this wonderful stuff, and then there's us down here who are reading shit. But they don't really point out that, hey, by the way, it's the same system. That doesn't make too explicitly clear in most cases. But the Buddhists are very clear about that. The whole notion of emptiness is very specifically their code word for unresolved, what I'm calling unresolvability. The fact that you cannot get to the bottom, you cannot precisely find what anything is, or even that it is. Everything is like a mirage. Whatever experience you're looking at, you look closer, it's going to turn out to be something else. And you look closer at that, and that's going to turn out to be something else. Forever and ever and ever, with no bottom. Fiddles all the way down, like all the way down. No, like last turtle. Look at the evolution of scientific theory. You see that in materialistic science. You're going to see that if materialistic science continues, it's going to go the same way. Every decade or 100 years or 1,000 years or whatever, they're going to look back on what was thought before and say, God, it's understandable why they thought that, but Jesus, they had it wrong. Quantum mechanics is going to be looked at one day the way we look at flat earthers. Because there's no final theory. They can't get there because there's no way that it is. You can just find, finer and finer and progressively different ways of seeing this, but it will never ultimately resolve to any one of them. There's no ultimate way that it is. And that's the ultimate way it is, which is very weird. It's a very weird critter here. That's why I like this word transcendental, because it really nicely conveys. Transcendental has all sorts of implications of, sort of superlative and grandness and all that, which I think is, even though evocative, is misleading. Transcendental isn't about how great it is and cool and special. Transcendental is about the fact that it transcends being anything, being any way. However it is, it actually is more than that. More than others, it was my formula way to put it in. So anything you find is actually more and other than that. And if you look at that anything, you will find more and other. And then you look at that more and other, and you will find more and other. Forever. That's why I call my website The Open Doorway, because that's a picturesque way of indicating this fact of the nature of experience. Any experience you go up to, it seems to be something, and as soon as you go up to it, it turns out not to be a thing, but a doorway into something else. And you go to that, and that turns out to be a doorway into something else. You're just forever walking through these doors, and you never actually get anywhere. Just get into difference and difference and weirdness and weirdness and more weirdness forever. You know, world without end, amen kind of thing. And look at that, it's quitting time. Saved by the bell. Thank you all for joining me.
Well,